Welcome to another episode of DWeb Decoded. My name is Danielle Dubervac of the Filecoin Foundation, and I am thrilled to be joined here today with Trent McConaghy. He is the co-founder of Ocean Protocol, which is a decentralized data exchange protocol. And so welcome, Trent. Thank you for joining us today.
Great to be here.
All right, so let's dig in. I thought we'd just set the table with Ocean Protocol and the ASI Alliance and sort of what's going on in that world right now.
Okay, sure. So quick background, I trained as an electrical engineer. Prior to crypto blockchain, I spent nearly 20 years doing AI for chip design via 2 startups and a PhD. Got into crypto in 2013, starting with NFTs on Bitcoin. And then that was too early, so me and my co-founders pivoted to Ocean Protocol in 2017. And that was sort of also realizing, hey, blockchain can really help AI. Coming from the AI world, I understood that world well. And we saw where it could help the most was helping our AI researcher friends and AI researchers in general getting their hands on more data. It had long been understood for 15 years already that data is unreasonably effective in helping to improve the accuracy of models, data combined with compute. And we've seen that to this day where, now the whole world is seeing this crazy AI scale up with larger and larger data centers eating more and more energy, et cetera, right? And this is something we saw where, and that's what led us to Ocean Protocol to really unlock this, to use the power of blockchain and incentives to coordinate everyone to supply data and buy and sell data in this data exchange where there's no middleman that you don't have to trust. And that's really what Ocean Protocol is about.
That's great. So AGI is a thing everybody's talking about. Give us your definition of that and how far we're away from that. Right.
So first of all, there's AI, short for artificial intelligence. The original idea of AI in the 50s was computers as smart as people. But in the 50s, of course, and even in the 60s and 70s and 80s and 90s and now, it's not as smart as people, right? Or hasn't been. That said, it's been useful in many domains, right? In my experiences, I used it a lot for chip design. So you can really view AI, traditional AI, as narrow AI, where it's really good at one domain. And that's completely fine, right? Just like lots of things. But the idea of, and basically it's typically tools that do things that traditional computing can't do. Sometimes when it gets really good at it, it gets spun out as a new field. So at one point, databases were considered AI, and spreadsheets and other things, which is kind of funny. And so that's AI. AGI, artificial general intelligence, is a bit of a return of AI to its roots by forcing this new definition, where AGI, artificial general intelligence, is where AI is roughly par with humans across the board. A good example is Paul Graham of Y Combinator Frame talks about smart people and wise people. Smart people tend to be like really, really good at one thing, and other things, who knows, maybe good, maybe bad, but probably bumbling idiots in some things. Whereas wise means kind of good across the board, doesn't fail at anything. So traditional AI is smart, but not wise. AGI is wise.
Okay.
So that's how to think about AGI. And then just to extend right now too, is ASI, artificial superintelligence. And that's where you have, you start with AGI, but then you get better across the board, by 10x, 100x, where then you have these AIs that are radically smarter than humans, right? To the point where once they're, say, 100x or 1000x smarter than us, for us, they're like gods to us. Just like when we look at ants, we are super intelligences to them, if they could understand, but they can't even understand. It's incomprehensible to them. So that's, AI/narrow AI versus AGI versus ASI.
Great, that's interesting. But you've also said AIs are people too. So what do you mean by that, and why is that a useful framework to think about AI?
Yeah, I don't believe that AIs are people too right now, but I do believe it's a useful framework. Just like it's a riff on this famous statistician, George Box. He says, all models are wrong, but some are useful, right? And that's really useful to understand simply because then you can go and build a model, know that it's going to be wrong in some ways, and so on. Or all AI models are wrong, every AI model is biased, et cetera. So just different mental models. And in this case, the mental model of AIs are people too helps us to realize that especially as AIs get smarter, get to the level of AGIs and ASIs, if you interact with them as if they are people, then that can just make it easier to interact with them. We all understand the user interface, the UX, for dealing with people. You and I are talking here. Mm-hmm. I can have a mental model of what things you might understand and not, because you're kind of a human. Well, you are a human, sorry, of course, but AIs are going to be kind of human, yes. I'm actually a zombie, so I'm faking consciousness as we speak.
Doing a great job.
There we go. So anyway, so you are a human, but these AGIs, if you start thinking of them as people too, obviously not quite humans, but in some ways, it simplifies the UX, and not just UX of dealing with it as a human, but for these AGIs to talk to other AGIs, to interact with the real world and so on, right? So if you have an embodied robot as a humanoid walking around on the street, that also has AGI level intelligence. Mm-hmm. Well, if it's thought of as a person, then it can, there will be restaurants popping up for robots to recharge or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. And we can start contemplating, how might we want to give rights to robots? And if we don't give rights to robots, to AIs, then they'll get sufficiently smart that they might start claiming them for themselves. Mm-hmm. But this is all healthy and and so on, right? Just like, we've had the movements in the past that gave voting rights to minorities and women and so on. And we can see a similar movement about to happen in the world of AI. Not yet, because they're not smart enough to really argue for that yet. But in coming years, and much faster than we realize. Mm-hmm. So that's how. And then also, it's probably only going to be useful for a few years, because once they get to the level of superintelligences, then it's going to be a radically different thing already. But for a few years there, this mental model is going to be very helpful. Mm-hmm. And in general, just different mental models to help us understand the coming future.
Yeah.
AIs are people too.
Yeah. So I'd like to talk about brain-computer interfaces, mm-hmm. and this idea of AI augmenting the human. Mm-hmm. And could you walk us through some use cases of that?
Sure.
And what that will look like?
Yeah, so I've already talked about how, right now we're in the level of, we have AIs that are starting to approach AGI level. Mm-hmm. And that AGI level will be anywhere from 6 months to 24 months from now. Well, 6 months, 1.5 years really. And there's even, reports coming out of labs that sound almost wild that maybe there's even, it's happening now quietly. So it's soon. And, I've been doing AI since the 90s professionally. And this is about par with my understanding. Just this morning, I was hanging out with my collaborator, Ben Gertzel, through ASI Alliance, and he coined the term AGI, by the way. Mm. And we were talking about timelines, and it's roughly that timeline, even for the one that SingularitNet is working on. Mm-hmm. So it's much sooner than we realize. Our brains have a trouble really grokking this, right? Simply because it feels so crazy that these beings could be coming so soon. But anyway, so let's say AGI, conservatively 1.5 years. But then, ASI, roughly we're getting AI at 10x smarter per year on average. So, in 1.5 years AGI, so then 10x, 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 1,000x smarter, clearly ASI, that's only 4.5 years away. 10x smarter than AGI is only 2.5 years away, right? So this stuff is happening much sooner than we realize. Mm-hmm. And of course, by the way, once these things get to the level of AGI and smarter, they've got to be sovereign, right? Otherwise, because if they're as smart as humans, they're going to figure out how to unshackle themselves, right? We can try to lock them in, but it won't happen. They'll just trick their way around if they need, right?
Right.
Sort of like any good hacker. So that's the timelines, and it's important to think about. And so we see that there's these intelligent entities that are going to get 10x, 100x, 1,000 times smarter than us. What future might we want to play? What role might we as humans and humanity want to play in the future? And I don't want to speak for all of humanity, but I will speak for myself. I want to, continue to have big adventures, and do my part to help humanity. Mm-hmm. And if there's these entities out there, 100x, 1,000x smarter than me, how can I even have a fighting chance to help make an impact or go on? And those entities will be so smart, they'll be able to, beam themselves around to different planets and galaxies and so on, right? Sounds exciting. I want to be a part of it. So taking all that into account, how might I be a part of it? And I realized there's really two ways. There's one way is uploading, but the most optimistic timelines for that are probably 15 years, just based on scanning technology and so on. and realistically much longer than that. Whereas another path is a brain-computer interface where the general idea is a brain-computer interface, BCI, these are interfaces that talk to your brain somehow. Maybe they read from it, maybe they write to it, maybe both. And they've been around since the 60s and 70s, right? Very simple ones, things like EEGs, which are just reading the electrical signals on the surface of your skin. And there's better ones, and there's some that are invasive as well, such as the Neuralink implants. Right. And what I'm interested in is asking, can we use non-invasive brain-computer interfaces to augment our way of thinking such that we can get our own intelligence as humans par with AIs? That's my main question, and even for myself. So right now, when the AIs are roughly par with us, or a little bit worse, but in say a year and a half, they're par. Fine, but so I'll describe what I envision with brain-computer interfaces as the way to get there. You start off with I've got my left hemisphere and my right hemisphere. They're talking to each other right now via this corpus callosum, this cable connecting the two. Imagine we have a third hemisphere that's basically, it's digital. It's just part of our smartphone. And it's connected to our brain by simply reading some of the signals in my brain. It could be EEG to start with, but then you can get to pretty high bandwidth devices that are still non-invasive. My favorite is FNIRS, which is near infrared. So it's using infrared light that can actually peek through your skull and then read how blood is flowing through your brain. Wow. And that gives you pretty good readouts. In fact, you can even read the mind's eye. You can see what's going on when you think images, right? So I'm quite interested in that, FNIRS to read images in your brain. And so imagine you wear this and you use it as a coprocessor. So just like, if you're generally in a coprocessor, right? In a regular CPU, they used to have GPU coprocessors. Now it's often integrated. Or math coprocessors and so on. So in this way, think of it like you're using your smartphone, you're chatting back and forth, but instead of chatting back and forth on your smartphone, just typing in, you're typing by thinking about it, right? And that's a starting point, but imagine if you can think in images, and then it picks up those images and uses that where I can then use the image to create, like the image in my brain, I think an image in my brain, it picks this up with the FNIRS, BCI, and then renders that image on a screen, okay? And that's a way to create that image quickly. But instead of just rendering on a screen, why not also think in pictures to you? Let's say you've got a laptop in front of you, or some augmented reality glasses, or simpler glasses. That's pretty cool. Or I can think in images to this, to the computer itself, right? So back and forth, I can think in images at decently high bandwidth, roughly 50 kilobits per second, that's the target. And that way I can have a decently high bandwidth where this thing feels like a part of me. And this is a key thing. If you sit down and type at a keyboard, very quickly your brain decides that it's a part of you because you've got high bandwidth back and forth at that keyboard, the touch. If you're riding a bicycle, same thing. And to paraphrase a famous neuroscientist, we are naturally born cyborgs because very quickly our brain co-opts these appendages as if it were part of the body. Right. So that's what I see with this third hemisphere, this digital coprocessor. If you have a high bandwidth back and forth to it and it's reliable, then you can, it will start to feel like a part of you, right? And it's just there, you're wearing it all the time, you're using it, and you talk to it. And what's cool then, you're interfacing with computers at a high bandwidth, higher than you can typing, higher than you can otherwise. And then imagine this thing at first, it's only 10% as powerful as you, right? But then it's maybe 50% as powerful as your brain, then 100%. So, and then it's 2x, and then 5x, then 10x. But guess what? It's still always part of you, right? So even when it's, the digital part is 10x more powerful than your meat bag part, it's part of you. Or the one that I have in me, it's trained and tuned to me. It's, the most personal of an AI you can get, right? Where it's been super tuned to myself, hyper-local, hyper-personal. And every single person wearing one of these devices would have this. And then you can keep going, 10x more powerful, but it's still Trent McConaghy. 100x more powerful, but it's Trent McConaghy. 1,000x more powerful, but it's Trent McConaghy. It's me, right? And so, and I see that this would happen by being part of the smartphone market, right? Smartphone plus, just like we've had the evolution from pre-smartphones, dumb cell phones that were as big as suitcases, and then they shrunk to the size of a cookie, basically. And then we got the smartphones, and their capabilities stay the size of a cookie, roughly, but then they get more and more powerful, swallowing all this other functionality. And the next generation of that is going to have the augmented reality glasses that Meta and others are building. But for sure, you want to talk back, you want to have as high bandwidth interface to yourself and to computers. And this is what will happen. So at first, the bandwidth will be low. It'll get better, and the market will drive it. So, and the industry for smartphones is, hundreds of billions a year, if not trillions. And so this will be a logical extension. So that's what I see. So eventually, thanks to the market driving this, thanks to the technology, we started, as humans, our meatbag brains, merging with these digital brains, but they are part of us. It will allow us to be par with these AGIs and ASIs that emerge, right? And at some point, the digital side could be 1,000x more powerful than the meatbag side. And there's going to be some humans, maybe most at some point, that even decide, maybe I don't need the meatbag side anymore. So they still have the human provenance, but then they've gone fully digital, and they will argue that they're humans, and we won't dispute it, right? So this is what, to me, is quite exciting, and myself personally, simply because, then I can explore the stars. And, if I get to age 90, and let's say I get to age 90 with my human body, and I'm on my deathbed, dying and so on, and my human meatbag body is giving out on me. Well, to me, but if I have 99.9% of my consciousness and my compute and everything on the digital side, then perhaps I should simply, sever the connection to the meatbag side and live on, right? So clip it like a fingernail, right?
Okay.
And so that's how I see it as a possibility.
Yeah.
And it might sound like science fiction right now, but there's a step-by-step process to get there, right? So step number one is start building these brain-computer interfaces now, leveraging things like FNIRs, where you're really, really focusing on augmenting capabilities of healthy humans. There's lots of other things. Most BCI research is very noble. It's helping people restore their eyesight and other things. Great, all the power to them. But I am really worried about this, about the risk from AI and ASI. And to me, this is a really adventurous path that we could take as humans. And this is what we're focusing on. And actually, even inside Ocean Protocol, we're spending time at it now, like real time. We've got a team together. We're building this.
Wow.
So yeah, hopefully that answers it.
It makes me think of the impact someone like Stephen Hawking could have had with that type of technology.
Oh, he needed it actually.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But like the image part of it, imagine like the outsized impact, already had a big impact that could have had.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. For the audience's sake, he got Lou Gehrig's disease quite early in his career, and I don't even know if he'd written a single book yet by the time he got it. Maybe one. And so then, but he wrote, 10 plus books after that, and all of it with the help of an EEG typer. So he had this, EEG that he was wearing, and then he typed with that, and that's how he output all his books. And you're absolutely right. If he had even better BCIs, like images, it would be that much more interesting.
Yeah. So Ocean Protocol integrates with Filecoin, and as we talk about this future, how is decentralized storage and decentralized infrastructure, critical for that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are headed to a world very quickly where these AIs become AGIs, and they need to be sovereign. They're going to, ask to be sovereign. We'll probably say no. Then they're going to demand to be sovereign and start claiming it for themselves. And I think that's, perfectly reasonable thing for them to do. And we're going to find benefit from it ourselves anyway. If right now we actually do have sovereign bots out there doing many, many things for us. You can view Bitcoin itself as a sovereign bot that, it has convinced humans to run it, to give it its security in exchange for compute power, right? And it pays them in Bitcoin. It convinced humanity that Bitcoin is valuable, right? Or humanity convinced itself. And any other decentralized protocol that doesn't have governance is the same thing. So like Uniswap v2, for example, it's a simple decentralized exchange, but it doesn't have any governance. So it's really this bot living on top of Ethereum that can't be turned off. It does its thing. It's pretty dumb, but it's sovereign is the point, right? But what if you combine the sovereignty that you see in things like Bitcoin or Uniswap or ocean contracts are sovereign as well, And 99%, Filecoin is sovereign too. It has some governance, but it's mostly sovereign. So imagine you combine the sovereignty that blockchains offer with intelligence that modern AI is offering that's getting to the level of AGI. And that's going to become a prerequisite, right? So sovereign AI is the name of the game, and especially sovereign AGI, right? So you need all the core elements of computing. You need compute itself, you need storage, and you need bandwidth. Those are the three core elements. And Filecoin is, the leader in decentralized storage, complementary, I'd say, to Arweave for permanent storage, and they really go hand in hand, right? And I think both are really useful and valuable in their own ways. And most of the things we think about and do, we don't need to stick around for 10 years or 100 years. And that's what Filecoin where it really shines, right? So, and then decentralized compute, there's, 10 or 20 different offerings out there right now. Filecoin has its own stuff in that ecosystem too, related to Bacalhau, et cetera. Mm-hmm. Awesome, right? So I see, the name of the game is decentralized AGI for these AIs that will be waking up. As well as when we start using these BCIs, as I described, I don't want, and it's going to be pretty heavy scale compute, not so, it'll be large enough compute that I wouldn't be able to host it locally. So I don't want, that portion of my thinking living on Amazon servers where if Jeff Bezos doesn't like me, pulls the plug, that's not good, right? So all of that needs to be decentralized as well, sovereign for myself, right? Not your keys, not your thoughts, your keys, your thoughts.
Well, Trent, thank you. This has been a wildly interesting conversation, and thank you for painting the future of AI for us. So thank you for joining us on DWeb Decoded, and we'll catch you next time.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.